Society teaches us that having feelings and crying is bad and wrong. Well, that's baloney, because grief isn't wrong. There is such a thing as good grief. Let's ask Charlie Brown.
You landed on The Substance, a podcast aimed at being biblical, thoughtful, and human. Join us here every other week as we engage the culture without the culture war. I'm your host, Philip Marinello, hoping everybody's year's off to a nice start here. If you are new to the show, we are a variety podcast where every other week we invite somebody who is thoughtful, interesting, talented, working in a field that has value, and we talk about something related to faith, culture, and the arts. Previous guests include folks like Johnna Harris from the Bodies Behind the Bus podcast, author Daniel Hill, Esau McCaulley, Jemar Tisby, and artist, activist, multi-hyphenated individual Propaganda. So we got about 140 some episodes. If you're new to the show, got a lot of good content spanning a whole lot of different topics. Cover movies, books, interviews. Back when we had many hosts, we did topic toss-ups, which I have been talking to Trevor about the potential of coming back to do another topic toss-up. I've had a few different people reached out and ask about it, and I myself, I'm like, man, I'd love to do a topic toss-up again. So maybe editor Dave can jump on the mic, or we'll get Trevor back. We'll see. But there is talks about more topic toss-ups because I do miss that format. But anyway, we are glad you're here. If The Substance is something you've been listening to for a long time and you like it, or if you're just feeling generous and preemptively you want to do it, be sure to hit that 5-star button on iTunes or Spotify. If it's something you've listened to for a long time and appreciate, write a sentence or two. It helps people find the show, and we appreciate you. This week I'm joined by Terra McDaniel. Terra is a spiritual director and writer who currently is living out of Austin, Texas. Her book, Hopeful Lament, recently from IVP. This is a topic we've been circling for a while. We've talked about it with several of our guests. I think all the guests that I mentioned previously that we've had on. Grief, lament. These have been things that we've talked about as part of other conversations, but we've been wanting to do an episode directly on this for a while. So when I saw that her book was coming out, and actually shout out to listener Summer Rodinger, I don't know if I've either one. Anyway, Summer mentioned that this was a great book and put it on my radar. So shout out to Summer. Really enjoyed this book. I think I even told her in the episode, I don't always do this, but it was only about 150 pages. So I read the whole thing before I spoke with her, and it was wonderful. So I know we've all been through a lot in our whole lives, but especially 2020 on has just brought a lot of hardships and grief in a number of different areas. And I think culturally, a lot of us are just not primed and given the tools from a young age to handle our grief. And a lot of our communities that we grew up in, and sometimes even our communities now, we don't have regular communal processes and practices of lament. So it's something that I think a lot of us are growing in. So was excited to have this conversation. Hope it is encouraging and edifying to you all. And without further ado, here is my conversation with Terra McDaniel on Hopeful Lament. Terra, welcome to The Substance.
Thanks for having me.
So happy to get you on with us. Grief and lament is something that we have been circling. We've definitely been engaging with it, but we've been circling let's do a full episode just on grief and even grief practices, because we've realized, and having conversations with several people, because of a number of different topics or books or things come up, we're like, man, grief is something we're not terribly well equipped as a current culture to really deal with.
That's exactly right. It's exactly right. There's a huge gap.
Yeah. So tell me, and I've read the book. I highly recommend. It's a little over 150 pages, really accessible, good stuff. But tell me how your journey with being interested in grief and lament as well as helping through it, as well as helping people through it. But how did your relationship with grief and lament start?
Yeah, one of the first things I write in the introduction is that I did not wake up one day and say, wow, I just want to write about lament and grief. It's not how it happened for me. It's not how it happens for most people. I came to it because I came through a series of losses and upheavals and realized as a long-term pastor, long-term Bible teacher, and I realized all of the things, all of the truisms, all of the Bible verses that I had at hand, all of the things that I thought were so clear and simple and straightforward were not. And I needed more than an encouraging word, more than trust God, it's going to be fine, look on the bright side, pause a minute and it'll be all okay. I learned the hard way that in the face of real suffering, those things fall flat, they're incomplete. And so I came to lament that way.
Yeah, no, it's something that I guess looking back, your book details some very helpful things in trying to bring them into the modern context. But yeah, when you look at other cultures and in past periods of time, like grief was something that there was communal education on.
Absolutely.
And that's not really something we have right now.
Mm-hmm. There was communal education, and even more than that, there was just communal knowledge.
Yeah, like participation, like
it was
communal norms, practices.
That's exactly right. It was just happening around you. So when someone died, there would be a wake, there would be a gathering, there would be steps that everyone kind of knew, and the young ones would be brought along. Like, here's what you do. Here's how you say goodbye to someone. Here's how you honor their life. Here's how you grieve well. And not just the loss of people, but practices around, bigger just complex kinds of losses. When a dream dies, when something you want to have happen doesn't happen, when you're saying, what is going on in the world? There were these norms and practices that everyone knew. Here's how you give embodied voice to grief and to pain.
So before we get into the book, one of the things that I always like to ask authors, I don't know if you've talked about this on any of your previous interviews, but tell me about your dedication. I love a good book dedication, and yours is healthy. Tell me about what went into that.
Yeah. I also love a good book dedication, and I maybe stretched the word limit on mine.
I liked it.
And I feel okay about that. I spoke first to my twin grandchildren. They're toddlers right now, and they're incredible and wonderful and delightful. And I spoke to them in hopes that they will receive this story, as they grow up, and that they will receive permission to experience and express the full the fullness of life. Will include joy, which will include delight, which will include wonder, and which will include loss, in their future, that they'll have permission to express the fullness of that. I speak to my godchildren, who are people of color, who I didn't realize that until the end of the book. Yeah. And then when I went back, I was like, oh, that makes more sense. Yeah. Who I want them to inherit, permission to be who they are, permission to be free in the world. I speak to people who have experienced, that I hope these words will be a homecoming, and permission to feel how they feel for as long as they need to, without apology, without needing to, without isolation, and without needing to kind of clean themselves up for the world. And I think last, I may be forgetting a step here, so forgive me if so.
No, yeah, there's only one more, yeah.
Okay, then I got it. So, and the last one is the most tender to speak about. I talk about my grandson who was lost, who my daughter lost in a really difficult miscarriage, and I speak to, I look forward to meeting you, which I believe I will. And trusting that he knows the things I'm talking about far better than I can. And I'm glad he's part of, that idea of cloud of witnesses has become precious to me over the years. And so the idea of that this child who we haven't gotten to meet yet, that he's part of our cloud of witnesses. And I think this is how it worked, yours too. I think that's really precious. So that's kind of what went into the dedication.
No, I love that. That's beautiful. No, you like a poetic and succinct dedication sometimes. That's really like sweet. But I opened up, I was like, oh, right. Like when if I ever write a book, no, I feel like I'm going to use that real estate well.
Yep. Yeah, exactly. All in.
So before we get directly into the material, I'd love to ask you a question about your background, and not even primarily through the lens of grief or lament or theology of dealing with hardship, but just your personal, what theological tradition did you inherit? Where do you come from? You talk a little bit about that in the book, but what was your spiritual and religious upbringing and journey?
Yeah. So I grew up in the Texas Piney Woods, Northeast Texas, and that is an area that is, I don't know if you've ever seen Grace and Frankie, but there's one episode late in the series where Coyote meets his birth mother, and she shows up to this Jewish family to have brunch and says, "What kind of Christian are y'all?" That
exactly.
And I laughed out loud because that's kind of where that's the atmosphere I grew up in. It is what kind are you? And there were all kinds of denominations, and so I grew up primarily as a Southern Baptist, and my dad's side of the family were United Methodists, and there was a pretty wide swath between who was right and wrong there. So I grew up with religion. I grew up with heavy emphasis on the Bible, for which I'm thankful for. The Southern Baptists taught me to love the Bible. I'm grateful to study it. I'm grateful for that. And they taught me kindness, just the value of being nice in the truest, not the saccharine sense. And I so value that. And since childhood, I've kind of been a traveler, and I feel grateful for that as well. I've been a part of Bible churches, if you're familiar with that.
Sure.
That when Seeker Sensitive kind of came on the scene in the 90s, man, I was all about that. I've been a church planter through some more conservative tribes, and sort of in adulthood, I've moved into and have really been captivated by more liturgical, more contemplative kind of worship. So kind of Anglican, Episcopal, Quaker kind of spaces really have spoken to me as I've moved into adulthood. But that's kind of some of the journey.
I appreciate you sharing that. Yeah, no, I grew up somewhere in between. Yeah, Baptist and Bible church is just like the independent, non-denominational, very heavy Bible. I didn't think it was heavy tradition until I kind of grew some, and I'm like, they definitely have their own traditions.
Absolutely.
But it's
non-denominational, and it's,
it's not a global historical tradition sense,
yes.
But it definitely has its own traditions. But yeah, no, I'm still in that sort of church now, but in a much healthier one than I was before 2020.
Oh, I'm glad. Good.
But I'm flirting with the similar thing. I really enjoy liturgy and IVP as well. We've had Dr. McCaulley, we've had Dr. Alvarez, and we just had on at the end of the year, Dr. McGowan and Emily for Christmas, which I love those little books. It's just such a joy. It's so like refreshing and like just recharging to kind of come to some of these things fresh.
Yes, it is.
So yeah, no, I'm very interested in that sort of thing. And I know a lot of our audiences responded to that as well.
Absolutely. The kind of liturgical year of, telling and retelling the story and going deeper in it every time, and letting it, as the circumstances of our lives are always different, no matter, as the years go on, the stories meet us differently. And so I have found that to be really life-giving, holistically, and in my family as well. Yeah.
So I don't want to talk about this in the wrong way, but I think it would be foolish to totally ignore it. I hear a lot of people talking about it in very kind of doom and gloom and maybe focus on it too much, but I think it would be unwise to ignore like the moment we are in, especially the last 3 to 7 years, like the time of difficulty and grief and kind of stacked traumas, and especially post 2020 with COVID, people's actual physical health and a lot of deaths that many weren't able to mourn with because of restrictions and travel issues and stuff like that. And then just the relational fallout of it's maybe not especially divided because people have always been divided. I don't want to be too myopic and self-centered, but the particular way that technology and media and social media kind of has capitalized on divisiveness as a commodity. A lot of us are reeling from relationships that have been harmed or damaged or destroyed. Like, it has been a unique time for grief and trauma, I would say, especially in the West, but I mean, globally.
It absolutely has. And you're exactly right. Like, our time is our own, and there's always been division. There's always been, there are always things to mourn in the world. And so in that respect, our time is not new. And, to name the reality that the first global pandemic in over a century, we're living in the fallout of that. And we are still living with it. Like, we're not.
Yeah, it's not just, it's health, it's economics, it's
absolutely
people who have owned businesses that got killed by it. It's
yes.
people who lost jobs by it. It's people who lost families and churches because of how prevalent disinformation is and the relational
yes.
discord that sort of stuff solves. Like, I mean, we've gone through all of that to a degree, but I mean, some people have really gone through that
yes.
in a extreme way.
That's right. And so absolutely. And so there are all these layers of loss, and there's also complex loss, which is it didn't happen to me, but it happened to someone I know, or I
Sure.
read this headline and I feel it in my gut, or,
I mean, right now, yeah, we're seeing horrific photos and videos of I don't even know if it's a war. It's more like the massacre going on right now in the Middle East. It's right. Awful. And
yeah, it is.
It's a balance, right? Because I'm like, I don't want to be completely ignorant of it, but I also don't want to be obsessed with it. It's a weird thing. And we have these devices in our pockets that we can go deep on something that is not a communal or like hurt. Like, it used to be like you had your neighborhood, or back in like your village or your city, like you had your people and you would go through cycles of good and bad and you would all do it together. Yeah. But now there's so much bad in the world and we can access it all immediately.
And exactly. And so what does it look like for us as individuals and in our families and in our communities to mourn appropriately, to honor the stories of grief that are happening to us, that have happened to us, that have ongoing consequences, and to honor the stories of, you see a headline with another child, another hospital, another hostage killed, all those things. What does it look like to appropriately mourn that without being swallowed over by it, without just kind of like diving into the rabbit hole, which does not serve us or them, right? But there's a way to be present to it. There's a way to be honest about it. There's a way to engage it in a way that it doesn't just stay stuck inside of us, and that honors the humanity all around.
Yeah, no, that's challenging, especially like we said at the top, for a culture that's kind of malformed in these things.
That's right. That's right. We are malformed, particularly in the West. We are very power of positive thinking, bootstrap yourself up. Grief is just negativity and it's self-fulfilling prophecy. You just got to look on the bright side. God needed another angel in heaven. That kind of mentality is so rampant. And so when we choose to engage grief and lament, we're coming against a headwind in that respect. I am convinced that if we don't correct that in ourselves and more broadly, it will cause unspeakable harm and will continue to cause unspeakable harm as I believe it has, because lament is truth telling. It's not, just stewing in grief. It's telling the truth. It's bringing things out into the light. It's trusting that God cares about the fullness of what happens, including the hard stuff. And it's a way, I love the way trauma psychologist Resmaa Menakem talks about it. He talks about doing this grief work as metabolizing pain, as digesting pain, which is, I'm so floored by that and so compelled by that phrase and by that way of describing.
No, as I read the book, which I told you before, I don't often do this, but I read the whole thing. The length of it definitely helped. I'm such a big fan of IVP's sub 200 page books. They put out a lot of really great stuff that's super accessible. Because I'm reading this for the show, but like you give this to somebody who's going through something. I really love that you have the practices in there too. I'd like to get to that a little bit later, but I wanted to ask you, like, as you work with folks, and I guess even sidebar, how do I even describe it? What's your role when you work with folks with these things?
So I'm a spiritual.
What do you call yourself?
Yeah,
a director. Okay.
Or another way of talking about it is a soul companion. It has some things in common with therapy, but it's not therapy. It has some things in common with life coaching, but it's not that. My role.
So what verb do you use? Do you like coach people or?
I often the verb I most often use is host or listen with, and the idea is I'm not there to teach. I'm not there to tell them what. I'm there to listen to what is stirring in their soul, good, bad, indifferent. So it's not all grief. It is at times. I'm there to listen to them and help them listen to themselves and help them to listen to what invitations are in their life, what they need more of, what they need less of, where God is in all of that. That's what I do as a spiritual director, kind of host people hearing themselves.
That's especially for people who are maybe reticent or new to it, I feel like host is a very gentle way to think it. So when you are hosting people, especially when it's a new thing for them, when they're maybe not sure about it, what have you found? What have you observed? What surprises people as they begin to learn about these practices and begin to engage in some of these practices? Because like you said, a lot of us have these complex, stacked up griefs and traumas that we've been ill-equipped to deal with. So when we finally start doing these things, what do folks typically see when they begin?
When people start unpacking grief, particularly if they've been living with it for a while and it's stacked up, like you're saying, they realize that grief is exhausting, that it is hard work. It takes courage to face it. The alternative is to stay exhausted sort of forever, right? But they find that it's exhausting. They find, paradoxically, that it's freeing, to name, oh my gosh, this is why I feel like I've been, just sort of trudging through sludge, or like why, or I've been mad at myself. Why couldn't I just get it together and get over this? When they start to name the magnitude and the depths and over time, they realize, okay, there's a reason this is hard. It is hard. It is exhausting, but it's also hopeful and freeing. And so what I often find myself encouraging people to do is to take sips, to move into lament. Don't stay in it. Step back and give yourself time to recoup and take it slow. Let it happen over time. There doesn't have to be a big rush, to just kind of slam through it. That doesn't work. and it's not safe for people to do so.
That can be a benefit of a practice too, right?
Yep.
Like you list several practices. If somebody feels like they're going through something or they want to engage something that they've like I can speak to that. Like I feel like I simultaneously have pretty good emotional intelligence, but I also know that like I know what some of the things are, but I'm like, I don't know how to deal with some of this. And like therapy's expensive. I know everybody says go to therapy. I've looked into it. I know people that do it. There's some organizations that'll help you out. And it's not that I can't afford it at all. I just go, man, that is expensive. So like, what do I even do with some of it? But with these practices, you can kind of just like exercising like your physical body. You can go in, start small, and then like that's it for the day. That's my practice of XYZ for the day. And kind of hopefully over time you will begin to unburden some of these things, I guess is the idea.
That's exactly right. That's exactly right. And again, it goes back to that idea of metabolizing pain. It's physical things, or it's writing, it's singing, it's these tangible practices of tearing or shaking a salt shaker, creating something that are so simple, that children can and do engage them, and they can be really meaningful. And as you say, the simplicity is the beauty of them. You don't have to go somewhere. You don't have to get a bunch of stuff, equipment that you don't, already have. And it's a way to go as far as you can with the time you have available and with the emotional bandwidth that you have available. And that's that level of processing. And you can leave it there for the day and return to it as you need to. And you can learn from the experiences and figure out, okay, I really connect with this one. This one, not so much. Maybe for something, another time. You figure out what works for you. You figure out what works, in community, because what I love about these practices is that they are very amenable to like a small group or a book club, even
like a slightly larger, like a family unit or like a little.
Absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. And I mentioned, that they're simple enough that children can and do engage them.
Yeah. I thought that was great that you mentioned that. 'Cause I'm like, I feel like in my relative, like it's a spectrum. Like I feel like when I was growing up, I thought I was raised pretty conservative, but some people were raised like crazily conservative. Like I felt like I had a few tools, but not really like, I feel like I was given permission and space sort of to like have these things, but I wasn't taught like, hey, when something really hard happens, this is what you do. I was never really taught that.
Absolutely. And so I wasn't either.
I want to fix that for my kids.
Yes, I wasn't either. And when I encountered loss, I didn't know what to do. And so I just, tried to, be the little comic relief, thinking, if I could make people laugh, it would be
familiar with
better.
that. Yeah.
Yeah. And I want to fix that for my grandkids and their children. But this idea that we can give our children tools to process what is happening to them and to all of us, that can happen in families, that it can and it needs to, and that it doesn't have to be this huge negative thing, that it's actually freeing. Like, hard thing, everybody encounters hard things. Everybody encounters loss. Children too. And so to really meet them and give them permission, to express it and to process it with you, and to even in age appropriate ways to see you as their parents and see other grownups around them like, oh, they're expressing their emotions. They're expressing their sadness. Like, it's okay to do that. It's not something I have to go hide away or feel embarrassed about. Like, that's a huge gift that we can give our kids.
And practically here, I'd love for you to share, particularly from your experience. I highly recommend people check out the book, or if you have a library card that has Hoopla, the audiobook that I believe you read is available on that through Christian Audio. But so if folks are listening now and want something tangible, what's one of the more effective ways that you've seen kids respond positively to if a listener has a child that they want to start maybe baby stepping with some good stuff? What's maybe one of the top ones that you've seen that kids understand and respond well to?
Yeah. So I'd say a collage practice is really fantastic for like kind of 4 and 5 up to me, grandparents. And so what's great about a collage practice is it starts with really simple tools. You can have, let's say you're grieving someone who has died. You could have photos of the person you lost. You can have magazines to cut or tear pictures and words out of. You can have paint or markers or colored pencils, tape and glue to kind of put it all together. And before you begin to put it together, you invite the children and you take part, if you feel able to tear some paper. Maybe it's from the magazine, maybe it's some kind of colored paper. And when they tear, you invite them to kind of let their hard, their sad, their mad feelings get expressed in the tearing, and help them give voice to emotion in that really simple but tangible way. And then you can invite them to take the torn paper and all those other components and create what they grieve, what they hope, what they want to remember, whatever speaks to them. They get to create something, from their grief and from their hopes. And that's something that a 4-year-old, a 5-year-old can do. The first time I started offering that was during COVID, actually. And I did it over Zoom with kids from all over. Some were local, and for safety, we didn't get together. And some weren't. The first time I offered it with my dear friend Kaisa Stenberg-Lee, what we noticed is that it was this disparate group of kids, most of whom had never met. And over the course of, we had some conversation, and most of our time together was them, kind of head down doing the thing. And at the end, they wanted to share with each other, like, here's what I drew, here's what it means. They felt connected, and they felt this movement happen for them. And it was really a beautiful thing, actually.
No, that's beautiful. And it just seems so powerful too. Like, I know my oldest is 5 and he loves making things. And I think I think he would respond very well to that. So also we get sent things all the time, especially from book publishers. We're starting to recently get some movies sent to us, which is great. Keep that coming.
Oh, nice movie.
But as far as book publishing sets, yours was really nice. It had some of the raw materials to engage in several of these practices. And my wife saw it. She's like, what's that? Because again, we get stuff delivered all the time. And I'm like, sorry, I'll try to get rid of these books as soon as I can when I'm done with these conversations. But she's like, oh, that's cool. Like, I think I'd like to do some of that with you. So, I mean,
I'm so glad to hear that.
Just like everybody, we've endured a lot over the last few years, and it's been quite a bit. So I'm interested and curious to see what that will all interact. So like I've talked about this on the show before. I try to address it directly, I guess, when it comes up. I don't know. Like, so my father passed away when I was in high school, and like, he was in my life, but not full on, like the full on traditional role of the dad. Like, he and my mom were married and he was always in the home, but like, he had some physical and mental challenges, and just, he had a hard life, but he also made things hard on himself too.
Yeah.
And he definitely grew up in a time where there was not a whole lot of good tools widely known. So like, just dealing with both his passing and like his actual life and the life I had in light of him, like, I was always like, I don't not want to deal with it, but I don't know what the heck to do about some of that.
Absolutely.
And in reading the book, like, I'm a big story guy. So like, when you talked about like movies or music, I'm like, I definitely, like, not that I use them as a crutch, but like, I know that, like, I can sometimes, I'll have the frame of mind and be like, oh, like, I feel like I'm processing something with this album or this film, and I feel a little bit better. I hope that was something good I just did.
Yeah, absolutely. I love that you talk about movies in your podcast, and I've had a chance to listen a little bit, and I have several movies I've added to, already. But absolutely, storytelling that happens through movies, through novels, through songs, can really help us. Even if it's not, exactly parallel, it can help us surface the experience. It can help us surface
Sure.
the themes of loss and of grief, and help us. And they can help us begin to process. I think that those kind of things they're not an end in themselves. They're not the sort of finished product, if you will, but they're tools, and they belong, and they're part of the process of bringing grief to life and even processing it. I'm convinced, absolutely.
So have you found in your own personal, and you get pretty personal on a number of different hard episodes of your life in the book, what maybe at different stages, what are one or two practices specifically that you found for what you have been through personally, found very helpful for yourself as an adult in this stage of your journey, or at whatever stage that you engaged with them?
Yeah. So one thing that I've found really helpful, and I'll speak to kind of some of the particular practices that have evolved over time. I'll say one thing that I find really important with all kinds of losses is honoring the anniversary of that loss. So for me, there was a catastrophic house fire. Every year when that day rolls around,
it was a very jarring opening to the book. I was like, oh man, we're getting into it.
Yes, my editor really encouraged us to dive in feet first, and so I said, okay, let's go there. Sort of put your seatbelt on. We're diving in. So that anniversary, and also, when you've lost people. So I'll tell you, I recently lost a father who I had a complicated relationship with, and loved him, and he was in my life, but kind of not as much as I wish he would have been. So I hear you on that. I have some close friends who lost parents as young people. So, so honoring their birthdays, we'll stay with people who've been lost for the moment, honoring birthdays, but also honoring the day they passed away is really important. What psychology is and neuroscience is finding, that idea of the body keeps the score, and that memories live in us. I'm convinced, and the neuroscience is getting there to back this idea that whether or not we acknowledge those anniversaries, they're cooking inside of us. They are getting stirred inside of us. And so to give, as those anniversaries roll around, to pause, to honor the loss, to honor what that loss has meant for life ever since. And that will entail grief, but also the gifts that have unfolded and the graces that have unfolded. And it's a way of stopping and processing just a little further what was lost and what happened and who we've become, as individuals, as family members, and as community members. And so practically what that looks like, sometimes it's simply journaling. Sometimes it's taking a walk and listening to, some songs that remind me of that event or that person. Sometimes it's cooking a meal, that kind of surfaces that time in life. It can be, sometimes it's simply lighting a candle. And every time you pass the candle that day, you remember why it's lit. It's lit to, kind of in vigil, and in memory of. So it can be really simple things. It can be more involved things, but it's acknowledging. It's letting things come into the light.
Do you do different things? So with you, do you light the candle for your dad, or do you do different things, different years, or?
I think different things, different years. I have a friend who has taught me by her wisdom. Every year on the day her mom died, she lights a candle. That's something she does every day. Others. So let's talk about adoption. Adoption is this beautiful thing that also includes a loss, a traumatic loss.
Oh my goodness, yeah.
Right? Because there's this family of origin that that can no longer be present in the same way for this child, and so they've got this lovely, hopefully wonderful family that they've been welcomed into, and there's a loss. And so with adoption, we could stay with the candle. You could do lots of other things, but on an adoption day, maybe you light a candle, and maybe you also have like a cake, or you go out for ice cream or pizza or something, so that you can honor the complexity. There's something to grieve. There's a loss to be grieved. And then that doesn't negate things that can be embraced and celebrated at the same time, if that makes sense.
No, that's good.
Yeah.
No, I appreciate that. I should I want to be doing more active things to just kind of continue to grow. And active is the key word, because I really liked in all the different practices. I don't know if I'm going to do all of them. I mean, I might try them all, especially with the kit you sent, but I would love to find things that work just to make incremental progress. Cause I'm speaking for myself, with my makeup in the way I am, I can definitely tell sometimes when stuff builds up and I just get a hair trigger and I find myself snapping at my wife or my children. And I'm like, what in the world? That was nothing.
Yeah.
It wasn't a big deal.
Totally.
I was like, I should probably deal with some of that.
Right. Where'd that come from? Exactly. And it came from somewhere. Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. It did. Okay, I'll name one more really simple, accessible practice that I have been loving. The more I do it, the more I'm loving it. It's a tear jar, I call it in the book. And
you're talking about that.
Yeah, it has roots in several different cultures, and it's just this idea of it kind of springs from Psalm 56, that idea that God, treasures our tears, keeps a record of every single one, keeps a record of every time we toss and turn and stay awake at night because of worries or grief. And this is something that can happen over a couple of days or even a couple of weeks. And you just take a jar of water and you have a salt shaker or a little bowl of salt. And every time a pang of grief or a thought of, wow, this hard thing happened, and let me pause and say, this is something that I use personally. And it's also when headlines are coming fast and furious from Gaza or elsewhere. And I just I'm what do I do with this pain of it's half a world away, but it exists and it's real. And I want to bring it before God, and I want to honor it, and you take the salt shaker, every time one of those things comes up, and you add more grains. And by the end of the day or two or weeks, all those grains are kind of diluted in the water, and it's a chance to recognize every grain of salt mattered. Every grain of salt is still in there. Every grain has been, in some sense, released from me. And yet, in some mystical way, God holds it. And I trust that God holds it and remembers it. And that matters.
No, I'm really curious to try that one, to see just kind of the act of physically externalizing something as a means of dealing with it. Cause we go what are we going to do? We all cry sometimes, but it's
sure.
What are you going to do? But I like the idea of journaling or building something like the collage or even with the jar, you are physically manifesting something so that it isn't just internalized and building up to a toxic level.
That's right. That's right. It's a way of kind of embodying and getting things moving. It could be, and I'll say, when I came across some of these kind of practices in literature and in the Bible, I used to think of them as really performative, and therefore,
sure, you mentioned that. I did too. Like the professional mourners, just because in the modern Western culture, like I grew up going. My parents, both of them, like very purposefully, like we were committed to our spiritual community and our church, and like anytime there was a wedding or a funeral or whatever, we were there to like engage in the whole course of life. But I mean, I have a lot of friends who like the first funeral they went to was when they were like young adults and their grandparents died, and that was the first time they've ever like had to like engage with death.
Yes.
And like our culture, we've like kind of medically seclude suffering.
We've sealed it off. We've
bad health and dying. And then we don't know, we like get anxious about it or are unprepared and just, not qualified to deal with our own emotions or what have you when it happens, when it touches our life.
That's right. That's right. Exactly so. And so, it's these little, I've come to believe it's not performative at all. It's, getting our bodies in the conversation that our minds and our emotions are already having, and letting all of that be a part of conversation with other people and with God, trusting.
And I'm excited to hopefully do that a lot better. And not that my parents did, but like they weren't told either. So
that's right.
Hopefully that's something that we can progress in.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly. It's one step at a time. And I believe it's possible. I do.
Talk to me a little bit about how these practices, particularly 2016 or 2020 on, how the folks going through like the deep and like explicit and clear church hurt isn't new, right?
It's
like
not.
Being harmed or abused or mistreated by religious institutions and spiritual communities that one belongs to. That's not new, but it's happened in a particular way and in a very like organized kind of holistic way, in our culture. And I know a lot of folks, a lot of our listeners who've responded to previous topics when we've talked about this, this is something that a lot of people are going through. So for the folks dealing with harm or trauma that has been done, and not just like some people shrug it off, go, it's not just like having problems with individuals at one's church, but being deeply betrayed, like by hypocrisy or directly mislabeled or having falsehoods spread about you because of all these social divisions and things like that. How do these practices engage with that? Are there particular practices that are good for that? Like, how would somebody who's going deeply through the deconstruction church hurt stage of things, what might be some encouragement or some practices for those folks?
Well, I'll speak to practices in a moment.
I say us. I count myself. It's not like we've been through a lot in the last few years.
Yeah. I'm sorry, and you're not alone, as you say. I'll speak to practices in a minute, but that's really what I wanted to underline, is that if that's you, it matters, and those who encourage you to minimize that experience, while they may intend to be helpful, that they are off base, and so to honor the reality of the experience, and as significant with the weight that it deserves. Is important, and to, for folks who are going through deconstruction or they're healing from a toxic or hurtful or traumatic church experience, it may be important for a time to step back or even step away, and that can be faithful too, and to not stay in it alone. There are others who are going through these kind of things, and they're
that
out
is
there.
Huge.
Yeah, they're out there to hear your story. To find others who can bear witness to your story and reflect back. Yeah, me too. Yeah, I something like that has happened to me. You're not alone. So to find those like-minded others is really important. And I think what practices would I offer for those who are dealing with that level, I would probably start as simple as possible with your breath. And you can echo, here's where there's such a rich well of spiritual and church history that we can draw from. We can cry with the psalmist, "How long, O Lord?" Or, "Why?" Or, "Where are you, God?" Do you see what those who claim your name are doing? We can say with the Psalms, we can say with the prophets. And so giving yourself room to ask those questions. And as I'm surfacing the Bible and I want to name in this context that if the Bible has been used as a weapon against you, that may be the last place that feels safe for now. That's okay. You can trust that God is in the world, and if right now, for a season, if going to the Psalms or going to the prophets brings up a lot of ickiness, there are other ways into this conversation, and it can still it can be faithful. It can still welcome God into it, and it can, again, it's that idea of being slow and attending to listening to the cues of your body. Like you talked about, like you notice, you're kind of like getting irritable out of nowhere. Like that's your body's talking to you, and it's not saying, "Hey, your family sucks." It's saying,
no, it's like you need some release. Go take a walk.
Right,
go do something.
Take a walk
or breath work or whatever.
Do the breath work. Pause and tear some paper, and then do those things. And then on the other side, the invitation is to reflect. What for now do I notice? This isn't like it doesn't have to be forensic. It doesn't have to be the end all be all answer, but what comes up? Where is this angst coming from? What's the first things to notice? And you make note of that, and you lay it down for the moment and return to it as you need to, and go deeper in it as you need to.
I put it out on social media. I usually do, especially when we have authors with a very clear topic, audience questions. And we got a few. One that I thought was really good that I want to hit you with. I was just saying, I love, this is a great conversation. It's gone by too quickly. But before, I definitely wanted to get this one in there. Mm-hmm. One listener responded saying to ask you, how do we practice accepting that some grief may be lifelong? So griefs and hardships, and I mean, in some ways all are, but particular things that we have to live with actively that are not easy to put out of mind. How do we, what practices can we deal with, and how can we maybe think about that?
Yeah. Thank you for that question, whoever submitted it. It's such an important one. I think many griefs are actually lifelong, and particularly like the shockwaves from COVID and from these last few years that we've lived through will be a lifelong grief for most of us, including folks who are little kids right now. Like they're going to remember this when they're in their 50s and 60s and 70s, and they're going to be living with the losses of this day. And I don't say that to be a downer. I say it because it's true, first of all. And so what do we do with that reality? I think it is knowing that lament is faithful, that it takes courage, that it takes energy. And all of those things are worth doing because they honor our own lives and the lives around us, that are the love in our lives, because grief is really about love that's lost or that's been sidelined in some way. And so lament is about love, and grief that's lifelong can be about honoring that love. That said, so it's that regular practice of stepping into lament as it comes up, as it bubbles up. And the other side of that coin is we can't live in lament all the time. That is not It's not
That'd be pretty
sustainable.
unhealthy.
It's not healthy. It would be destructive to do that.
Well, and just as unhealthy as not dealing with it at all is like living under a constant cloud of that.
Exactly so. And so there have to be rhythms of engaging lament, of stepping back and taking a breath of fresh air and putting your feet in the grass and finding things that make you laugh, that delight you, a good movie to watch that's going to make you think, things that will take you into the present, into the here and now, and into what is good and beautiful and true in the here and now. That finding those things is vital. That's a vital spiritual practice, just as much as lament is. And the other is pacing. It's figuring out what the rhythm between those kind of two perspectives needs to be. And I think the last thing I would say about what do you do with lifelong grief, it's permission to say some grief is going to be lifelong. That in this side of heaven, that's part of it. And so even just breathing a sigh of relief in a way that this is true. This grief will be lifelong, and it doesn't have to consume every minute of the rest of my life, but it's going to be there. And what does it mean to let it be woven into the fabric of life without becoming the whole of the cloth?
Oh, that's good. As you were saying that, one other thing popped up for me. What would be your encouragement for men who, I feel like men and women are kind of malformed, but once you get to your, like me, I'm in my mid-30s now. I do have a couple of lifelong friends, but none of them are where I'm at geographically anymore. Like those of us, men and women, who maybe don't have a strong group of community that has had a lot of continuity, like a lot of people moved, or just like the 2020 shakeup, COVID, with houses, with churches, with jobs, a lot of people had to start over new and don't necessarily have deep communities with a long-standing history. What's your encouragement for those of us like adults trying to build new relationships and find a community to grieve and lament and have joy and to grow together? Yeah,
to lament and to celebrate, and to simply live life together. I love that you asked that question. I think culturally, particularly in the West, but more broadly, women are seen as more emotionally intelligent and more able to engage the hard emotions. Doesn't mean men can't. Doesn't mean men don't. And it doesn't mean men don't need to. And I think my best encouragement is, keep asking that question and ask it in places like this where it's sort of broadcast into the cosmos, so to speak, but ask it with people that like, I want to go deeper, not just with the kind of interesting things, but can we talk about what's hard and what's good? Like, can we do that? And be on the lookout, use your discernment to find people who are able to go there with you and begin to cultivate it. It can happen in communities. It can happen in a book club. But starting to cultivate these kind of spaces, I think is going to be a lifeline. It's worth the awkward intro into some of those to find ways to get there. We need to get there with each other.
No, that's good. No, I appreciate that. Thank you, Terra. So one thing before we let you go, we like to do a segment called Substance Shoutouts. So what have you been reading, watching, listening to, enjoying, whether it's books, movies, albums, podcasts, articles, playlists? Like what has been enriching your life lately? And you can come up with a number of things that you'd like to share and commend to the audience.
Okay. I love it. I am always reading like 50 books at a time, not really 50. I'm loving all the things. Let's see. What have I been reading that's given me life? The Comfort of Crows by Margaret Renkl. It is a book about finding wonder around us. And what I love about it, you talked about how you're loving my book and others from IBP that are super digestible. This is a book that has one chapter for every week of the year. And it's just about hey, can you pause and just consider like what's happening in your backyard or in the park in your neighborhood,
Oh, nice.
and just open yourself to the wisdom of the creative world. So I'm loving that. I just finished. I never. I can count on one hand the times that I've done this. What's it called? Lessons in Chemistry.
Okay.
So I watched the short series. I think that was on Netflix, but I might have it wrong.
I think that's either Apple or Netflix.
Yes.
Is that the Brie Larson one?
That's right. So I watched the short series, loved it, and there's lots to love about it. It's kind of aspirational, rewriting history, feminism kind of stuff. It's some really wise practices around grief and loss.
Nice.
It's finding community where you are. Anyway, so I watched the show and I read the book and loved it. Just found it's funny, it's engaging, it has some depth.
I love a good mini series too.
Yeah.
There's plenty of shows that I watch but it's nice to be like, okay, this is just 6 or 8 hours and then that's it.
And then it's done. It's done. What else? I was recently introduced to the artist Sampha, and I'm really loving his music. So I'm listening to a couple of his albums.
Sounds like a Vincent. For longtime listeners, one of my previous co-hosts, he was every single episode. His shout outs were some obscure musician that none of us had heard of.
Yeah. Full disclosure, I learned about Sampha from some Atlantic kind of listicle sort of article. And I was like,
album title that you said you've been listening to.
So Process and Lahai. Well worth it.
Excellent.
Do you have movies for me? One or two of your best of?
So I'm always cautious because I'm a big movie guy, not just, I go once or twice. I go a lot and I watch a lot. I watched like 300 some movies last year on my Letterboxd log. Mm-hmm. What kind of stuff do you like? Like, what are some movies that you like, or what genres or themes? Like, what? Yeah. Help me understand your tastes.
Okay. I love a good period drama. I love a good melodrama. Superheroes. Okay. I can do those. Sci-fi. Love sci-fi. I would say I have a fairly broad taste. I don't do a lot of horror anymore. I have enough of that in real time and dreams. So I don't do a lot of horror. I will say I just watched the Doctor Who Christmas special, the 4 series.
Sure.
Yeah, that was fantastic. Highly recommend.
So not hard horror. You mentioned earlier you listened to some of our episodes and you were enjoying the Cat People ones. I highly recommend, and those are like horror from the 40s. So they're deep themes and they're not graphic or anything like that. I'd recommend those. But so you said period melodrama and sci-fi. I'm a big fan of this series. Like I'm into a lot of different fandoms. So this is one I was already primed for, but I was taken aback and surprised at how substantive it was and how good it was. Like for me, I was probably going to like it no matter what, but I was stunned at how wonderful Godzilla -1 was.
Okay.
I don't want to. So like you find this out right away, so it's not too much of a spoiler, but I didn't know this going into it. The movie Godzilla -1 follows, it's set during World War II.
Okay.
Just like the original one was in 1954. Or actually, no, like this was set like in the war. So the protagonist of the movie is a guy who signed up for the army and was assigned to be a kamikaze, and he deserted because he didn't want to kill himself. And it's following him through like his journey, dealing with his own survivor's guilt and like betraying like his duty as a kamikaze and trying to survive the Godzilla destruction. Like I was shocked at how I was like, wow, like what a take. This is like the 38th movie in the series. And I was shocked at how like deeply human it was, as well as having awesome like monster destruction. And it was very melodramatic because it's a war movie with a monster in it. But I think that was great. And maybe it's gaining a lot of momentum and buzz. But The Holdovers, have you heard of that one? It's a Christmas movie. It's about these kids at a boarding school who don't have anywhere to go to over the holidays. So they stay at the school and it's them kind of dealing with their own griefs and traumas over a holiday when they're kind of alone and kind of forming like a newfound family over the holidays.
Okay. Thanks for both of those. I'm in.
Nice. I love when somebody genuinely asks for a movie rec, but like you don't want to recommend something too crazy to somebody depending on what it is they're into. But yeah, I was shocked. I'm a big Godzilla fan, but I was like, man, it was a stunning film.
Yeah. They went somewhere with it. And
like the full human range.
I love that.
Awesome set pieces. And there's only one thing about the whole movie I didn't like, but it didn't really ruin it for me. And I'm happy to recommend it to anybody who doesn't mind sitting through a monster movie.
Oh, I do not. I love it. Well, thank you.
Well, I will definitely put a link for the book in the show notes, and for Hoopla. I'm still trying to get Hoopla to sponsor the show. But other than the book itself, where can folks find you? What would you like to point folks towards as far as your work goes?
Yeah, the best place to find me is terramcdaniel.com. Terra is spelled Terra, and that's where they can sign up for my newsletter. They can find out what I'm doing. They can read my blog. There's some free downloads there. So that's the best place to catch me. Second best is Instagram. I'm on there pretty regularly.
Well, Terra, thank you for your time. It was a joy having you. This is something, like I said, that we've been circling and talking about here and there, but I'm glad that we're able to kind of have like an in-depth discussion just on this. It's important, and I feel like a lot of people growing up, I was not talked about this enough. So excited to have some good resources to hand to people on the topic. So thank you for that.
Oh, my pleasure. Thank you.
So there you have it. That was my conversation with Terra. Man, it went by in a flash. I really enjoyed talking with her. Yeah, I looked at her website. I may look into actually using some of her services myself. It's pretty affordable. It seems pretty low key. I know the stuff in the book is already great, but yeah, she. I think the material she's working with has a lot of value. And I'm just grateful for having such an accessible, practical resource out there to recommend to folks. So go pick it up. I'm going to have a link in the show notes. Maybe even, it's been a little while since I had a conversation with my IVP folks, but they're always great. See if we can get you guys a discount code, and I'm sure follow the social media. We'll probably have some giveaways as well. But this is a great one. If you get this at your library, the audiobook is on Hoopla. Check this out. This was really, I think, important. And if actually we take these practices and we use them, I think we will see a lot of good gradually shifting in our community. So I hope that we all take this to heart. So thank you, Terra, for your time. Thank you, IVP. This was a great one. Listeners, reach out to us. Let us know what you think. What stood out to you? If you have anything particular, Terra was very open. We may kind of have a follow-up. If you guys have any particular questions, again, really appreciated the one that we had. I thought her answer to that was fantastic. So let us know what you thought about the episode. You can reach us at thesubstancepod@gmail.com. Send us an email, or you can record a voice note and email it to us. If it's maybe under 90 seconds and some good stuff, might be able to put that on the show. But that's how to reach out to us. And also, if you want to just reach out and like Summer did, we shouted her out at the beginning. If you have a topic or an author or a film or an artist or what have you that you think is a substantive thing that you'd like us to check out to potentially invite somebody on the show to share with others, we are always open to that. So you can do that. Either DM us on Instagram or thesubstancepod@gmail.com. That's where you can contact us. We are looking to grow our Patreon community in 2024. So if The Substance is something that's of value to you, you would like to see us continue and grow. And I don't know if we're quite ready to go back to a weekly schedule, but we would love to make more types of things. our YouTube. Dave's been talking to me about doing more videos, so we have a couple ideas of that. If you want to be a part of the growth at The Substance, you can do that on Patreon at patreon.com/thesubstancepod, or if every now and then you want to just give us a tip, you don't really want to do the monthly support, you can do that on Cash App, $thesubstancepod. Supporters of the show on Patreon will get early access to Editor Dave's audio interviews with people. For us, we occasionally will record bonus content that's exclusive, or you can also vote to influence future topics. So you can do that there. We love everybody that has ever given. And I'll also put this out. If you guys know anybody who might have something that fits with our audience, we are looking to expand advertisers or sponsors. We don't want to just have anybody. I know Trevor would always joke with me that I was always trying to grow the show and he didn't want to do wacky commercials. I know we had that life insurance guy for a while, but whoever, if you know anybody with a business or a product or a service that goes with the values of The Substance, we would love to connect with us. So I will say, I don't know if anybody's still listening at this point, I just had a very exciting discussion. I don't want to say anything yet until it's happened and it's in the bag, but we are circling our first total. Yeah, I think so. And I don't think either they just worked for the film festival. I don't think they were filmmakers. But anyway, we are circling a conversation with like a legitimate director. I don't think we've had a director on the show previously in any of our substantive cinema episodes, but not just like some independent short filmmaking person, but like a real filmmaker that actually many people will probably recognize as an actor. But yeah, don't want to say too much until that's in the can, but that's very exciting. Got a lot of exciting books coming out in 2024. I've already lined up several substantive cinema episodes. You may see an influx of those. If we just have a ton of them in the bank, we may release some of those. As kind of bonuses to the biweekly. You may, on the off week, we may drip some of those out extras just because we've got a lot of interest in that. But yeah, got a lot of exciting stuff and a lot of interesting. We talked to Caitlin Chess about maybe potentially coming back and doing some minis just with 2024 being an election year. It's going to be interesting. So excited for all the things ahead for the year. Sorry if this outro is taking too long, but we appreciate everybody. Listens, shares the show, all that stuff. We're doing it for you guys and we appreciate you. So I've been your host, Philip Marinello, and we will see you next time on The Substance. I have a pretty good relationship with IVP. They're very proactive in getting their work in front of like the right audiences. Like a lot of our audience, I think, is ripe for the sort of stuff they're doing. But you specifically came on my radar because one of our listeners mentioned it, and I didn't realize until today because I was just rushing, trying to prepare with my job and kids and all that. I was doing a little bit of research on you and I reached out to her and I said, hey, like I see you guys connected on several things. Do you guys know each other personally? And Summer Rottinger, she DM'd me and said, hey, you should look at this book. Cause we mentioned on the show before that Lament is something that we'd like to do, a topic on at some point. And she said, hey, check out this book. So,
oh, wow. Amazing. She's a long-term friend, known her for, well over a decade. So
you or her husband married them?
Yeah. My partner officiated their wedding. That's right. Gosh, I had forgotten that. a lot of water under the bridge. Years together. That's right.
Cool. Well, I'll probably shout her out in the intro because I love it when the listeners of the show drive the content.
Yeah, I love
because we're making it for them.
That's right. And Summer is, she's a lot of things. She's
wonderful.
She's such a thoughtful person. I really appreciate her in so many ways. So please
She's one of the people who I've recruited to be an occasional unpaid staff. As soon as we get more, I would love to bring on, but the heavily engaged listeners who are thoughtful, like I've used her to do a couple of things before and she's great.
Yeah. She's a smart cookie.
Listener, Summer Rottinger. I don't know if I've, either one. Dave, maybe we'll I'll reach out to Summer and ask her for the pronunciation, then we'll cut the wrong one, or we'll just leave this all in.